Okay, wig wearers, we are going to look at the opening of a short improvisational piece now. So an opener, basically. We have the cadence, which is kind of the close, kind of the end, or at least the end of a section, the last video. And now we're going to talk about how we open it up. And I'm going to teach you two ways, which are kind of super Baroque and really beautiful sounding to do that. And a lot of this stuff, by the way, is to try and explain some of the references I make in other videos, which might not make a lot of sense if you're not used to this sort of thing. So I'm going to try and talk a little bit about, chords and stuff like that, but really we are still thinking contrapuntally. Okay, so our first opener is a so-called tied bass opener, and it has this thing where we start on 1, we'll do 1 again, we go down to the 7, half step lower, then 1. And the chords that go along with that, if you want to think chordally, are C, and then we might go to a D minor 7 with a C in the bass. Are you hearing it yet? And then the G major, G7, back to C major, right? So that is, of course, this. The famous Bach prelude, number 1, which gives it its name, page 1. At least that's what John Mortensen calls it. I've also heard it called the tied bass. This comes from something called the do re mi, something I've talked about before actually in my invention, 2-part invention and fugue video, which probably didn't make any sense to anybody. But do re mi is just 1, 2, 3, first 3 notes of the scale, right? And against that you can set a simple counterpoint, 1, 7, 1, yeah, like that. And together that gives you octave, 10th, and it can be inverted and all sorts, but we won't worry about that for the minute, right? So, that only gives you a C major, and then the next interval is a 9th. And we can have, or a second, we can have a so-called 4-2 chord there, which is figured bass for 3rd inversion, 7th chord. And the diatonic 7th chord that goes with that would be D minor 7. How nice is that? And then we go down a half step to G/B, or a 6/3 chord. We can put the 7th in as well, which in figured bass would be 5, natural 5 in this case. So, boom, boom, ba, yo, yo. And that slightly embellishes our do, re, mi in a really beautiful way. Let's put it in D minor. This works really well in D minor for some reason. Okay. So let's do the first chord with the D on top and bottom. And then we go... This chord will be the 2nd degree of the natural minor, which is E minor 7 flat 5, or E half diminished with the D in the bass. And we take the bass down by a semitone and keep the other notes the same, which gives us this beautiful C sharp diminished 7th chord before we move to an A7/C sharp, our 6/5 chord again, sorry. Then to a D minor with the F on top. And you can figurize these. Figurize? Is that a word? No. You can break these up into arpeggios, right? As for instance, the famous... Bach example, right? So this is known as a figuration prelude. You can do this with a minor as well. So let's start with this shape. Okay, and then we have the opening to a prelude, for instance. Lovely. Right, what can we do with these things? Well, we can attach them to our cadence, and then we can have a really short composition. Nice. So for instance, this one, C major. We go to 3. I mean, maybe that could be a chaconne, which is like a repeated bass line improvisational composition. So we go... And then maybe... Let's try that again. So we're starting on and then do a whole load of, that could be the theme, and then you do a whole load of variations on that bass. Isn't this lovely, by the way? If I take the, this is kind of C over E, but I'm putting the G on top because I don't want to have like parallel octaves. It's like, I want to avoid that, so this. Now I could just go into the F chord, which is the 4, so we have 3, 4, or 1 over 3, 4, 5, however you say that. And I could just go straight to F, but I could also carry the note through. It's G against the F, gives you the ninth. I think that's really nice. The sus4 on the 1 chord is always lovely too, to give it a nice feminine ending. Let's have a look at the minor. So we don't have to necessarily use the do, re, mi formula. We could go I go to the cadence. Go to the tiesto piccolo. Why not? Why not? Probably many reasons, but I'm going to do it anyway. Or maybe more of a saraband sort of feel. So. I'll do that again. And then maybe this. Yeah, that's nice. Right, our second opener is going to be this lovely thing called a quiescenza. And a quiescenza happens all over the 1 pedal, or the so-called tonic pedal, as people would call it today. And this is basically, in terms of like Roman numerals, it goes 1, and then we have a secondary dominant, 1, 7 to the dominant, subdominant, sorry. So it's 1, 1, 7, 4, and then 5. But again, the 5 is over the 1. Which would be quite unusual if you haven't played that before. It's a beautiful sound. So C major, for instance, is C major, C7 going to F, F over C, and then G7 over C. So not a million miles away from our tied bass, but instead of moving, the bass just stays there. And it moves in a slightly different way, I guess. But it's a similar vibe, I think. And then in minor, it sounds great. You have a majorized 1/7 chord. 4 over 1, and then we go to back to 1 again via 5 over 1, right? So D minor, D7, G minor over D, A7 flat 9 over D, and I make a nice opening for a versette as well. Now, sometimes chords get chopped out of that, so if you know this one. That's lacking the D7 chord, it just goes straight to 4, G over C, D. And then we get this. I guess it's a C sharp diminished 7th with a D in the bass. And that's a really nice opening as well. And again, you not necessarily have to break these up into figuration preludes. Yeah. And again, you can sort of stick these to cadences. So, for instance, let's do a different key. Let's do G major. So if you're thinking about figuration preludes, obviously you do need chords, like, multi-voiced. So you can arpeggiate them in whatever way you desire. But obviously for more of a kind of melodic or block chordal style, you kind of not, you don't have to have as big chords. And I work a lot in 3 voices, actually, because I find it quite freeing. And so on, right? So I find like the 3 voice thing really helps for me doing that kind of thing, and playing these figuration pieces, these broken chord things, which are so natural to the guitar, is actually weirdly quite a lot more work for my poor brain. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you find that useful. See you on the next one.